Good evening. Today on Show Studio we're going to be speaking about Fendi. So if the panel would like to introduce themselves.
I'm Daryoush, I'm a DJ, producer.
I'm Sharmadean Reid, I'm the founder of One Owls.
I'm Verity Parker, I'm the fashion editor at matchesfashion.com.
And I'm John Michael O'Sullivan, I'm an architect and writer.
So Sharmadean had the brilliant idea of talking about just the general idea of Italian design. As Fendi is probably the most haute design of all the Italian labels, or definitely the most haute fabrications. And the idea that Italian design is sometimes misunderstood. We have the idea of, you know, the Sicilian breasts and the sort of Madonna, Sicily, D&G. And we have the sort of slightly anally retentive Milanese idea, but we forget there's so much more to Italian design in it, and it's, you know, one of the oldest visual cultures in the world, one of the oldest continuum cultures, but it's also done so much. I mean, design as an idea is almost Italian. So let's talk about it. Sharma.
I think the main difference is that Sicilian and Italian are two different things. And anyone who's Italian or Sicilian will say that. My thing with Italian design is it's either really rooted in the extreme past, almost like Neolithic culture, or it's super future, it's super technical, super scientific. All my favourite Italian designers are obsessed with science and technology and space and, you know, other things apart from what's in front of them right now. So I think what's interesting for me about Fendi is just how you mix those two things together, something super primitive and something super tech. You know, Italy's just it's a place of industry, Milan's a place of industry, and they're always working to do better, bigger, better, faster things, and it's part of Italian history. Like, Italian futurism, as we said earlier, is so different to German futurism, and it's part of their culture. It's unknowingly part of their culture because people don't associate it with Italy. They think of, like, 70s, 80s, 90s sexuality, whereas I think here the technology is the sexuality.
Well, they forget, I mean, for me, because I started off as a car fan when I was a kid, so people forget about Lamborghini and Ferrari and that very Italian idea. You know, our cars don't look like that. Our cars look like wardrobes, you know, like Rolls Royces and Bentleys, and you know, Lamborghinis and Ferraris are slick rockets to the future, and yeah, and so much the heritage of modernist architecture, and I think Fendi does tune into that.
Yeah, and I think I suppose the difference is in the UK, the Industrial Revolution happened in the 19th century, so we're kind of left with all that Victorian tailoring and that heritage and history, but Italy had its revolution in the 20s and 30s, so that's when they discovered all that, and so their whole language is that incredibly modern, futuristic, pumped up. You know, it was such a poor country, and then it went from almost like they were, you know, Middle Eastern countries are doing now. It went from 0 to 100 overnight, and that's why I think you've got that extremism to some extent that happened sort of after the First World War and carried on to sort of the 50s and 60s.
And also the repetition, if you look at, like, futurist art and the obsession with repetition, and she's done it in past shows where there've been, like, lots of mannequins or lots of people in identikit. There's something very, like, obsession with the factory and making things and churning things out and pumping, that's like, it's inherent to what she's done before. So I'll be excited to see what she's doing this time.
Well, she said, was it 1 or 2 seasons ago, she said the catwalk, the scientists with the new rock stars. She said that. So she's obviously does have a mind to that. And I think the women's wear often tunes into a very futurist, you know, because she does work with Carl on it. And that definitely has a very, probably more forward looking than the menswear, but
I think that's the, you know, knowing that we were coming here today, I had a really clear vision of what the women's wear was like, and I just couldn't, you know, without looking at the shows, say the Fendi man is this, or it just doesn't seem to have that clarity and that sort of individual shows you can kind of remember things about, but you know, if it wasn't happening, I'm not sure if it would be missed necessarily. It doesn't seem to be adding a lot into the general conversation about design.
And what, Jodie, for you, what does a Fendi man bring to mind?
Probably has a fur something somewhere, a little fur cuff or a collar. Fendi's like, did it start as a fur house? They've always used lots of fur, haven't they? So I expect we'll see trimmings of fur. That's what I think of when I think Fendi. And nice handbags. They do an accessory very well.
Yeah.
It's true. Well, I think Fendi was probably the first ever sort of real fashion show I'd seen. It's like not a London one. And I remember a proper one, yeah. And I remember just bags.
Yeah.
Just like, even though it's men, it was just bag. Actually, they've calmed that down to an extent, which was interesting. And you were saying something fascinating about Fendi earlier.
Well, so I used to live in Italy a long time ago. My background, I've done a lot of work in retail design and working with department stores and with some of the luxury brands. So if you went back sort of 10, 20 years ago, Fendi was, you know, it was kind of riding the Gucci wave a little bit, and it was kind of one of those brands that was coming up, but it was always the second or third shop along the street. It was never prime position. It was always a little bit kind of more low-key, and obviously the baguette came out and started to change everything, and then Louis Vuitton came out and, you know, bought them, and that all changed that. But they, you know, had those very relatively simple shops. They had a factory north of Rome on a completely anonymous suburban side street, no fuss, all white, really, really kind of down to earth basically. And then, not quite overnight, but they've just changed themselves so much in the last decade. They've brought in Peter Marino, the New York architect, and he's designed that palace in the centre of Rome. So now you have Palazzo Fendi, and it's kind of all very epic. They're restoring the fountains in Rome. They're sort of becoming the new emperors of the city almost. But next year they're moving to Mussolini's old Palazzo della Civiltà Italiana, which was the centrepiece of the EU war district in the 30s and 40s. And it's incredibly iconic building, but it really was Mussolini's kind of, I guess, biggest kind of architectural statement. It's been empty for a long time, and for them to kind of come in and take over that kind of fascist emblem, it kind of, while it's not a literal thing, it does say a lot about their ambition and what they're trying to do as a brand. They just become, everything's become ramped up, I think, in the last few years. There's more fur, there's fur on top of fur, there's fur cubed and squared and merged into leather. Everything just seems to be getting a lot more extreme. And I don't know if that's what needs to happen now for a brand to differentiate itself in that Italian luxury context.
I wrote my dissertation on fashion and fascism, not like how you might think. I wrote about Arena Home Plus and how it kind of displayed fascist ideals in terms of like a heroism between soldiers, like dying. There'd be loads of shoots of models in graveyards. Like there'd be shoots of a whole family of blonde people all in black, like foraging, but looking super slick while foraging. And when I think of Fendi in that, it's basically that. It's like foraging, but looking as slick as possible. It's like wearing a crocodile skin that you've caught yourself, but it's like you've had someone make it into the most luxurious crocodile skin ever. And it's really fascinating that it's fascinating for me that they're moving into that building, because, like you said, it's just showing their intention of, obviously fascism wasn't a good thing, but when you think about most political movements, for whether they're good or bad, what you've got to respect them for is the power to change opinion. It's like, even when I think about something like Christianity, like spreading like wildfire across the Western world, like that's amazing that Christianity is one of the biggest religions now, like that someone could spread that message. And with fascism, you don't respect their ideals as a whole, but you respect that they, for a short period, took over.
That's the supremacy.
Yeah, and I think maybe it is a statement, whether it's subconsciously or not, that they want to amp everything up. Like LVMH are really strategic about pushing certain brands at certain times, and maybe the move into this palace is a signal that it's Fendi's time.
I wonder if they have to like hold any sort of apologies. You know, do they make any statement about that they sort of disassociate themselves with that sort of thing, or like, do you know what I mean? It's quite an interesting thing for Italian people as well in the current climate of sort of not wanting to be associated with that, and about being more sort of modern, and that they're not Berlusconi, they're not, you know, it's quite an interesting time. I wonder if they sort of apologise in advance. Or
Nisha Prada's talked about it, but hasn't she, about the difficulty of being a designer in a Berlusconi world and the weirdness of Italy, and obviously it comes up in Marnie a lot as well.
Yeah.
I don't think they have.
No, just be interesting,
Not
wouldn't
from
it,
my
if they
sense of
suddenly
Google
come out with a
searches
thing
today.
as they
Well,
move
there's
in. So.
There's not the same. I mean, Mussolini generally didn't kill people because of their race.
Yeah.
It was only once the Germans lent on him, and because they basically took over, didn't they? Sort of underground. So I think there's not anywhere near the same sense of regret in Italy about him as there is in other countries.
But I still don't think it's something I'd be happily associated with, though. I think especially like sort of creative fashion, you know, like sort of open-minded, more lefty sort of Italians, I think they'd find that quite a...
Well, I think that's quite interesting
thing.
in Italian culture that that a lot more people buy it. You know, a lot more people buy fashion that is actually mass culture.
Yeah.
So they don't have that same association that we have with fashion being something that's only the top echelons of society, I think. So maybe they just don't have as many...
principles.
Yeah, but also it's not like... It's not got that same elitist connotation.
Yeah.
You know, because...
Well, it does, and they like it. You think about the Italians, like with all the logos and the brands, you know, they're still going for that more than anybody, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I
Gucci
feel like-
and everything, I don't know.
I feel like nowadays, almost nobody's apologetic over anything
No,
if you
it's
think
true.
about it.
Yeah, artistic license over
Yeah,
everything.
someone like Rihanna, who's managed to coast her career on being completely unapologetic. But
Just being real.
I do think about it because I think that things happen all the time in media, in politics, in society. There's not the big apology or the damnation of a brand in the way there was like 5 years ago. Even just as little as 5 years ago. I don't think now people care about making apologies because the world's full of fans. The world is full of fans and someone will be your fan.
Yeah.
So it's fine.
And it actually comes around to the whole
That's
fur
interesting.
thing to some extent,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Because Fendi have become incredibly unapologetic
Yeah,
about
yeah.
celebrating that.
Yeah.
Because for a period there, fur really wasn't the way out, and I think they tried to find lots of other things to do. But again, they've flipped and they've gone, you know what, that's who we are.
And it shows weakness, doesn't it? As soon as you're apologising for something, you suddenly there's
Exactly.
a doubt that you might
Yeah.
not have, believe in yourself fully. So if you, apologise like for being in Mussolini's headquarters, you're sort of thinking maybe it's not right, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas like, should we just go for it
We're
in
going
a
to extend
sort
it,
of
have a considerate
arrogant
treat.
way? Then you're sort of going, you just go for it.
That's interesting. And what about this idea of, I think one of the some of their most beautiful shows, they do have this conversation between primitive and modern going on. And I find that very interesting because I was hoping you could shed some light on it. That sort of moment in modernist architecture when things were plugged into this kind of cave, 1960s space cave, almost a bit Barbarella, almost a bit... I was wondering, because I get that all the time from Fendi.
Yeah, I think you forget how long modernism lasted, that it really started, the end of the 19th century, carried on right through to the 70s when people really fell out of love with it. And in that time there were so many versions of what modern was and so many arguments. So by the time it got to the 30s and 40s, people were already looking back at early modernism and going, it's incredibly white, incredibly simple, it just wasn't actually saying anything beyond shape. And I think that's where the whole, being simplistic about it, bringing people back into the equation came in. Architects like the Smithsons in the 50s, who did these incredibly brutalist buildings, really thought things through to the nitty-gritty of just, it became much more about inhabitation of the space, what would trigger people's emotions and responses, what would a fur wall do, what would a stone wall do, what would a volcanic tufa wall do. So those extremes really start to come into it a lot more. And I think cinema has a huge amount to play in as well, and Fendi's been associated with film right the way through its history, but I think cinema and the world of cinema sets has always pushed the boundaries of what reality can be. And that's happened hand in hand with architecture, and architecture I think has changed a lot to almost reflect that. So you're seeing in architecture now the same kind of things you're seeing in fashion, which started off with that brutalist stuff with a wall that looks like, a chunk of volcano but is actually 2 inches deep, to a Fendi store now where the ceiling is made of travertine, which shouldn't be able to be suspended. So all that kind of reality, surreality stuff I think is all mixed in there.
And a sort of sense sometimes from I mean, Fendi goes through stages, but sometimes with their fur, you'll get these almost sculptural, almost sublime blocks of fur. You know, like they look really modern, but they also just look primordial.
And sometimes they just fling an entire animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, haven't they printed like the F's onto furs before?
The women's wear last season, everything was all.
It's so good.
Because when I was,
It's so bad.
yeah, it's amazing. Like the intricacy of it, or like you said, like it's like a mink underlayer.
Yeah.
It's something that actually you can't even see. And that's about luxury as well,
Yeah.
right? Like that pure thing that your fur's hidden. Like it's not even about being on show.
Fine detail.
Yeah.
Well, she actually said she was. She said in an interview in W magazine a couple of years ago now, actually, and she was saying, you know, she's really sick of sort of designing things to make people look rich. And that she said that people have totally got wealth and luxury confused, and you know, luxury is a private thing. So she was very ahead of the curve there on that kind of rejection of ostentation.
While holding her Fendi bag.
While holding
Wearing her mink coat.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and then you read about these incredible ideas, like, you know, woven furs to recreate the look of crocodile skin, and you know, and transparent animal skins, and you know, just amazing ideas.
And she does it in a way that she then described that as an art, as opposed to something that was kind of just too ostentatious. You know, but surely you're doing that just to prove that you're so rich you can make your fur look like crocodile. And she would actually say, well, no, that's the artistic license coming into it. Actually, it's just pure creation, rather than sort of ostentatious, sort of luxe money, sort of wearing your money on your sleeve.
Yeah.
I think if I was picking things, that's what I like about Fendi, is that kind of mad laboratory thing where they are just doing amazing things. And I get a bit frustrated, I guess, with the whole couture thing of, you know, all these amazing embroidery houses, which are kind of wonderful, but they're also doing something that should be extinct, really. And actually people like Fendi, they're doing this incredibly futuristic stuff, seems like a much more interesting way of spending your time, number one, but also just kind of like a more intelligent, contemporary way of doing couture, something like couture in the future.
And what's going on with Roman fashion? Because isn't Sylvia some sort of head of the Roman...
Oh, Alta Roma.
Yeah.
I don't know. You see, the press releases say it's doing well.
They would.
I mean, it's got opportunities there, in that there is an amazing history in Rome of people like the Fontana sisters and Simonetta and Fabia and all those people in the 50s and 60s, Valentino, Roberto Capucci, and they did really build up for a short time Rome as a hub before it shifted to Florence and then Milan. But I guess it's just a question of can fashion fit any other cities in on the schedule anywhere for whatever reason. So
I was wondering what's peculiarly Roman, because obviously Fendi is the ultimate Roman, and unfortunately I've never been to Rome, but you know, the idea of the eternal city.
I mean, a little bit like you're saying, that Rome is built out of these incredibly primitive blocks of stone, and I think that's everywhere you look. There's that kind of, if Milan is polished and Florence is a little bit more artisan-y, it definitely gets more and more primitive as you move further south. So I think you've got that kind of inherent in it, and it is that push and pull between that. It's very kind of, you think about people like Capucci and all of those, it's that violent colour, it's really, really confident, it's unapologetic again, it's just a more extreme, I think.
There must be sort of weird levels though to Rome, surely. Like, you know, because it is this centre of a global empire, it is this bizarre place where all the priests live above a gay sauna. It is like...
They don't all live there, but...
It is this... I mean, you know, it's just like if there's some sort of Illuminati, a lot of them are living in Rome.
Definitely.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've been into the Vatican City, as you do, and been behind the scenes. And it is amazing there, because it is just this whole other world of secret tunnels and, you know, coffee shops that are full of Renaissance sculpture, and the scale of the city doesn't make any sense because it was built for another time and another world order again. And it's quite a small city as well. That's what people I think forget, is it is this huge centre, but it's not a big place. So you've kind of got a giant Leicester Square zone full of the tourists, and then quite a party city. It's quite and it's a real mixture of city and country as well. I think is the other thing about it. The country really comes into the city, so you've got that kind of backwards and forwards in a way you don't have in a lot of other cities in Europe.
I've never been to Rome, but from what you say, it explains a lot about if it's country and city, that idea of going back to nature, but then having the future, and also the stealth wealth kind of thing. If you're surrounded by like the most valuable ancient things on a day-to-day basis, it's not going to be something special for you to be carrying a woven fur coat or an extreme luxurious crocodile bag. It does explain a lot really about where she's coming from as a designer. And I think loads of people forget that if you're a designer and you've got everything at your disposal, it's just fun to play with the technology and what's possible. It's really fun to go to all the artisans you work with and be like, this is what's in my head, how can we make it happen? Like, so as well as the ostentatiousness of it is, it's about pushing the boundaries of what is possible with the materials that we have. Well,
also I like the earthiness of Fendi, obviously because the fur is, it's an animal. And I like the earthiness, and if there's this idea of the countryside coming into the city and sort of, the terror, the I can't say it in French, terroir, or whatever it is, but like the earth, I love that.
I saw this like, what are they called? Like a meme photo? I don't even know. It says, you might be cool, and then it has a photo of like a Himalayan guy covered in fur on a motorbike with an eagle on his arm. And it's like, but you'll never be as cool as this guy with wearing the fur that he just killed with an eagle that's his pet. Like, there is an obsession with the coolness is in the primitiveness, the rawness.
What do we think?
Authenticity.
Sorry.
I was just going to do one word. That was it. Authenticity.
What do we, Jodie? What do we think about men in fur? Because Charlie Porter, who I keep quoting because he's great, but I don't know that I agree with this point, was very against men in fur. Where I've always wanted a massive fur coat.
I have some fur. I mean, keeps you warm.
Would you fancy a man in fur?
Probably not. I don't think it's particularly sexy, really. I don't think it's attractive to someone of the opposite sex. I don't think. I've never really thought about it that much.
I think it's sexy.
Do you?
I think it's really rugged, but it's purely contextual, because if I see a man in a fur in London walking down the street looking like a bit of a...
Not fit.
It looks a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous. But if I went to like Texas and saw him walking in a fur that has like possibly been handed down from his grandfather who shot it.
Like some coyote or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After chasing this coyote for 3 weeks on the ranch because they were killing his foxes, then that's sexy. So it's purely contextual.
Yeah, it's not really a hip hop thing, is it? It's like when you see all those like Jay-Z in a full length.
No, it just
mink,
looks a bit
that's
ridiculous.
definitely not sexy.
Yeah.
If it's Puff Daddy, maybe.
Puff Daddy's
I'm only
different.
joking.
What, in white? Big white.
Yeah, chinchilla.
Fendi does remind me of that ghetto fabulous era. Big
But it was like that, wasn't it? It was always into that when it was all about the monogramming and all about that.
Yeah, it was like Gucci, Louis Vuitton,
and Fendi, they were your guys. But I think that futurism thing is partly a rejection of that as well. It's about being more conceptual, less of like that Roman, sort of Rome versus New York kind of luxury thing.
Yeah.
It's a part of us, seems like a bit of rebellion to be super modernist.
Fendi was very much on the front of that, of the revival of maximalism. When you were talking about Home Plus earlier, they really pushed that idea of maximalism in the mid-90s, and sort of when wallpaper came out, I mean, a lot of the coats looked like a lot of the rugs that wallpaper were telling people to get. And I always think of that kind of, there was that guy with a big beard and the long hair, that sort of model that was everywhere back in the sort of later mid-90s, and So, I didn't hear whether you fancied guys in fur.
I think I'd go with no. Yeah. But like, we went to Mongolia last year, and it is like exactly as Sharma said. I think it's completely different. Like we saw a guy with his huge fur and like the eagle, literally the eagle, and you think actually that's kind of amazing. But I don't know if it makes you like sexually fancy him, but definitely looks cool.
I think you do though, because ultimately you think he's a warrior. He's going
Yeah.
to protect me.
Yeah.
He can kill his own animal.
Something very
and
basic
feed the
about it,
family.
isn't it?
It is really basic.
Innate sort of thing.
Or at least he can afford to buy a fur.
But then that's the opposite of Fendi, isn't it? Because then it's all about, you know, I don't know, they seem so much more plush. It's not quite as unfinished as that. They'd be proud of the way that it had all been interlocked 4 times inside out and back to front. And
There's sort of 10% of me though that's always fancied sort of going out with Roman Abramovich, even though
does he wear fur?
even though he's like literally like
Gross.
dark, but like you know, and runs. He used to have an office in the Kremlin,
Yeah.
and sort of he would interview who was there.
He's
But
a
yeah,
dodgy
10%
bird.
of me has always wanted to sort of go out with him, and I reckon he would have a helicopter and wear Fendi fur. And like
In private.
shoot things like on his huge like 2,000 square mile like stretch of Siberia.
Tundra, yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea.
It's still quite purposeful though, because he's Russian. It's just
Does
that
he get away with
here.
it?
It's
Yeah.
just here. It doesn't warrant it. It doesn't warrant it to wear it here. Really, I mean, it's more of a folly, and I think Fendi's trying really hard to go against folly and doing details like mink inside. It's like I read about this ring where all the diamonds are on the inside, and I think that's really super sexy to have all your diamonds on the ring on the inside, so only you know that they're there. I think that's what Fendi going for. It's like your luxury is what you know to be luxury, not because you're gonna take a picture of it to share with the world so that people can comment and say, wow, you bought this new bag. So you can try that. All brands can try and do what they want, but then when it goes out in the realm and other people adopt it, you can't really stop
can't control,
Puff Daddy
yeah.
from wearing Fendi. You might be able to stop him from coming to your show, as many people do, with many
It can still buy
rappers, but they can still buy it. So
I think the other good thing people forget is if you went back 30 or 40 years, wanting a fur coat wasn't an exceptional thing. Most, middle class wives got one. But it was kind of that. Well, I've been reading a lot of 50s magazines at the minute, and it's full of articles about how to get a fur coat, and it's by marrying, by being a model, by saving up over 7 years,
Literally say that.
right down to killing your own. And but it wasn't. Most women. That's a real extreme thing to say, but a lot of them, particularly in America, fur was huge. All the department stores here had huge. House of Fraser, Debenhams had huge fur departments. So it's only recently that's become an extreme. It's always, I think, been an extreme, not an extreme thing for men, but an unusual thing.
And is that because the technology is advanced and we don't really need to
I don't
wear
honestly
fur?
know. I don't know. I think there's a lot of like with everything. Fur, I think, is hard to look after, isn't it? So people have gravitated towards easier fabrics and things that are easier.
And
to
it's also
manage.
not very politically correct.
Well, I think that's
Yeah.
what I was
Let's
going to
not
say.
forget that.
Yeah.
Oh,
it
that.
was
But I
it
think
was
that
running
made
in a
it more
forest
expensive.
once, you know.
Yeah.
Are we apologising again? Yeah.
I think fur is a byproduct, which it hardly ever is these days, admittedly. Like, I read about how Angora was made, and I literally can't wear it ever again. And it comes down to human, what's your opinion? It's not like I'm going to see someone wearing Angora and be like, oh my God, I'm not going to hug you. Do you know how that sweater was made? It's just my personal choice that I'm not going to wear Angora again. But to go back to what you said about the technology getting better, I think it's gotten loads better, because there are 2 designers now who are working loads with faux fur, and that's their thing. And I can
Who was
never
it?
imagine that happening 10 years ago, where people accepted faux fur to be as cool as fur.
Who was it who mixed
Shrimps and the Charlotte, is it Simone or Charlotte Simone? I'm not sure. Someone will tell me who that designer is. So Charlotte S has made these Prada-esque fur
Yeah, like
scarves.
when they did the stalls a few years ago.
Yeah, and Shrimps is a brand that specialises in the most coolest bright coloured
It's
fur
also similar
coat.
to that Prada stuff, though.
Yeah.
And you can also get fake fur now that looks really real if you're going for that look.
It's the combination of the aesthetic that you want. Like, I'd love a faux fur bright pink coat, but then feeling not guilty.
Not guilty.
And also the expense, because her coats are like £600 compared to thousands. Yeah.
So let's look at the collection. We looked at the mood board behind this wall earlier, and they had a sort of animatronic man, a bit like Bowie in Diamond Dogs, but this guy was turning from some sort of ape man into a man. And then we had a modern building in those kind of weird Fendi Giorgio Moroder colours, black with yellow, sort of neon yellow, acidy yellow highlights.
Fendi yellow.
And then there was like the primitive leather, the primitive croc, and the primitive fur as a combination. And the runway is fur.
I was just going to say
runway.
Yeah,
it's like
they're actually walking
Well,
on
that's
it.
kind of major.
That is
That's
major.
Is that? Are we gonna? Is that?
Do you
Is that going to be your house?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a fur hat in the look before,
deer
and
stalker.
you wouldn't fancy a man wearing that hat.
No.
actually, no.
There you go.
But I even like that. I think that looks really cool. I think walking on the fur is a massive statement.
It's very Tom Ford.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Well, he's
almost
done that.
it's,
Yeah.
it's a combination of like we're so rich, we
Yeah.
can walk on our fur, and also it's like saying it's not important, so we can walk on our fur.
Or also that it is so important that you walk on it. Do you know what I mean? It's like that sensual thing of like you should always walk on
Hugely.
something that's like even the best.
It's funny that there's been so
That's
much.
fur. You can tell that's shaved mink or something.
And
That
it
you can
looks
tell
like
that texture.
rubberized, like a really rubber coat, so you're getting the contrast of the two textures there.
There's I might read some highlights out from the press release, just because the materials and fabrications, which is a word I keep hearing and loving, are just so pornographic when it comes to Fendi. So this collection stems from a lucid observation of reality through the Fendi lens. It's graphic, modular, efficient and pragmatic in an off-kilter kind of way. The stress on texture, which is luxuriously high quality, creates a slight friction with the functional pureness of the design igniting energy throughout. Treatments transform statement pieces, distorted Prince of Wales check. A calfskin biker jacket is embossed and embroidered to resemble crocodile. Suits of compact and deep textures. Felt reoccurs, providing protection and warmth. Fur, a quintessential element of the Fendi DNA, and savoir-faire, is all around and subliminated in a mink overcoat or in a blue and brown marmot coat.
It's pretty raw, isn't it?
That's pretty
raw, yeah.
This almost goes what we were saying about the edges being unfinished and looking a little bit rawer. Well, I don't think that model is the best model to wear this outfit because he looks like a teenage boy.
Drowning.
Yeah, he's tiny. But really, a manly man wearing that, I see that as the vision of like the primitiveness, but with the sleeve. The shoes throughout are so nice. The shoes seem to have like a little tonal printed effect on them as well.
There's lots of bags as well.
That coat is
Loads for
lovely.
the
thing is
carrying.
with like that's why she said because the shapes are always really good, and I think that's why they actually do end up selling the ready to wear because actually the shapes are always really good and actually fit like blokes that would never wear that.
Yeah.
But they might wear those trousers with the jumper and just you know that's how they can buy into it.
They've been mixing neoprene with fur and doing crocodile, fake croc out of neoprene.
I
which is
love
bizarre.
neoprene.
That's quite a cool idea. They fake croc out of neoprene.
It's one of my favourite materials
Yeah.
ever. I just feel like it is super techy, but you get it. What you can do with it, the colours. Like I've got a bright neon orange neoprene jacket. It's just like you couldn't get that colour in another material because it would absorb the light. You know.
Yeah, I told you that's what it
They've
is. It's
got-
that density or something.
They've got a V-neck jumper made of mink,
Dope.
a
Christmas list.
crew neck that melts from needle punch texture, morphing from knit to sheepskin and back. It's just outrageous.
It is.
See, if that's not ostentatious, then what is? Do you know what I mean? It's like they just want to be so removed from ostentation.
But I think
and
the
they
point
just
is
go for
it doesn't really look that
That's-
ostentatious.
No, that's the
when
point, yeah,
you
it's all
see-
understated,
It's
isn't
really
it?
understated.
And this huge check again, this like huge check in grayscale is everywhere.
Everywhere. The greyness of everything everywhere right now is quite startling. Like everything being super black, shades of grey and navy.
Wow.
Mittens and all.
Those mittens make it look really berry.
Yeah.
I think on the greyness front, I think that's the thing people forget a bit about Italy as well, is you have got all sort of the young cool guys and the denims and the sharp suits, but actually there's a huge culture of obsession with British culture. And when I was working there, my boss's role, and they're kind of sheepskin car coats and
Prince
Yeah.
Wales checks,
and there
everything.
are all those kind of ye olde England shops there. So that, it's weird over the last 3 or 4 days to see so much greyness and pinstripes and Prince of Wales checks, but
Very
that's
British.
kind of all in their world as well.
So I guess that goes back to Savile Row and all that stuff. That's the ultimate luxury, isn't it? I guess they think for menswear, so to mix those like fabrications and ideas with the fur.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just answering to a market though, rather
Yeah,
than
that's
like
true.
a design,
principle.
a principle of design. I
Yeah,
feel like
maybe.
you get Italian tourists who are super bougie. It's all browns and greens, and then you get the ones who are silver puffer jackets, and it's like it's more of a marketing thing, to me.
Coverall bases.
Yeah. Although there's no silver puffer jackets as yet.
That'll be in the commercial collection that we
Oh,
don't
right,
get to
yeah.
see. But do you know what I mean? They
Yeah,
do it, like
yeah.
you said, they do it for
Again,
everyone.
that
They'll still do
pattern
it.
there, the cobble pattern, that's in the Palazzo Fendi. They've got this incredibly slick building, and then they run these Roman cobbles right through the inside. So it's kind of that, again, it's that completely unexpected thing, and it's exactly that pattern.
Wow.
I love that. I love that. I've seen quite a few Italian houses. Is it called Trullo houses?
Truly, yeah.
Yeah, where inside they're super modern, and I think that's so. It's cool turning like a monastery into something
Or
really
just
slick.
inside.
Yeah.
Yes.
That coat looks nice.
But it's something weird about hearing a press release that's full of texture and all that stuff, and then seeing men in ties. I don't know. It's you can't think if it's really all about texture. You just want to let the clothes be a bit more.
But I think that kind of
Liberated,
works, like in
I
a
guess.
styling way. I think that kind of works. Because otherwise it looks a bit. But I think otherwise it looks too repetitive.
But I just don't get that.
I mean,
I
the
don't
thing
understand
is,
where that comes from. That bit of it.
I mean, the thing is, in IRL, these pieces would read outrageously. Like you wouldn't. It isn't a schoolboy jacket. It's like, my God, he's got a huge fur on.
You're right.
And I think
and a handbag.
Man bag.
And leather
A little
trousers.
swatch.
In July.
Perfect.
Jodie, are you seeing anything that you could wear?
No.
It's all too
It's
butch.
very sort of muted and kind of.
I think it's muted here because it's like on the screen muted.
Yeah.
I think if you walked in with any of these pieces, we would be like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, let me touch you. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? That's the thing. It's almost like a good thing, really, because not everyone wants to walk around like a fully peacock. If you see someone on the other side of the street looking all bright and crazy, it's kind of cooler if you don't realise until you go up to them that they're wearing something absolutely luxurious.
But like you said, Sharma, as well, like when you see these in the showroom, they probably are much more blue than you think. That suit's probably more like an electric blue, like with there's all like flannel fleck trousers, and it doesn't really do it justice sometimes, does it? Until you really see it and touch
As
it.
as
Astrakhan.
somebody connected to a luxury store, how are you reading this as a commercial collection?
It's interesting because I think you have to dissect it so much. Like, I'm still quite used to shooting fullstyle.com looks, but I think as I'm learning more about that sort of, the commerce side of it, I think it's so broken down from what you see here. And like I said, I'm used to, you think style.com looks 6 and you get the whole thing, whereas I think the buyers are so clever because they go in and they adapt it exactly for what they know will sell. And they might do a fur jacket, but then they'll ask them to just line it. And so many pieces are sort of, made individually, I think, for different stores now as well. But I mean, I'm sure it sells very well for us. I know that much for women's and menswear. It's quite new for us, but it does. It's really popular.
It sells well.
Yeah.
And what kind of stuff? Is it the fur or is it?
They kind of don't shout a lot about fur at matches for exactly all the reasons that we were just talking about.
There's even a fur
Not like that,
wall.
shouting about it.
Even the wall is fur at the back.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And who do you know who the customer is for the menswear?
I think it probably varies. Like, I think there's still probably like a sort of footballery element of it where they buy a sort of Fendi, because they'll still make a polo shirt with a little logo on it, for the stores.
100%.
They still exist. And then they also, I know at the moment we've got this amazing reversible, like white and green sort of waxed cotton blazer, which actually, if you wore it, would look like super cool. But then also you could get a 50-year-old bloke wearing it in Wimbledon Village who'd probably also wear it in his own way, you know. So I think that's why the brands and the buyers work together to make quite a clever sort of selection of an edit, really, for the brand. So I think it sort of sells on quite a lot of levels for us.
And Jodie, what are you thinking about right now?
What am I?
About Fendi.
I think
actually, you could just tell us whatever you want.
I was thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. No, not really. No. I think it's very nice. It's like super luxury, but without being too ostentatious and too loud. It's kind of, yeah. I mean, it's very nice clothes.
Is this? Because I'm a bit confused by all of these collections have been quite quiet, apart from Versace. Is this, because I can't really understand why, because the economy is meant to be, you know, taking off, and the only thing that I can, the only thing that I can tune into is this whole idea that in China everybody got in loads of trouble for showing off their money, and there was a sort of order put out that you shouldn't show off. But I don't think that's the reason why. Why has everybody done a quiet?
Why does it all look so safe?
Yeah, there's a lot of dark colours, there's a lot of like, nobody's really making a statement.
Do you think it's because they might not have to, because they're going to sell the majority of accessories and everything else? Maybe she's trying to be artistic, an artist, and say something by kind of not saying something, because although the collections and fashion seasons are massively important, it's not really what's gonna, it's the t-shirt with the logo that's selling at the end of the day. I have a friend who worked at my wardrobe. She said exactly the same thing at my wardrobe. The things that sell are a t-shirt with a logo on it, and it's like, they don't have to scream in these shows, because yeah, sunglasses, perfume, everything else, all the collaborations that go with it, that's what's making the money.
And you know, sorry, Sean, I was just going to say, like, you know, it's the same thing, like, these will still go into GQ Style and W and interview, they'll still shoot that full-on look with, like, with the fur deerstalker and all of that stuff, but then when you go to look at Fendi.com or Barney's or Selfridges or whatever you go to, you still then buy what you can to buy into it. You know, so like it gets represented in every, they sort of like, it's like a win-win situation for them, I think.
You might buy like the nice jumper.
Yeah.
Or the nice black trousers.
Yeah. Or the sunglasses, which are like massive selling, because I also think as well that maybe what I'd like to think is that fashion in the last couple of years has become so accessible to everybody. Like, people who don't work in fashion have an interest and a stake in fashion in a way that, you know, they didn't before. It's like when I came here and you said, have you looked at the shows? In all honesty, I hadn't, because I don't work for magazines in the way that I used to anymore. I don't think I should be hanging around a show when it's not my job. But a lot of people do, and I think maybe this is like filtering out the folk who want bells and whistles and everything else, and true people who truly care about fashion and clothes and style will appreciate this collection in a way that others who just want to shout about fashion and wear the latest shoes and handbag and whatever, you know, the it pieces, and be photographed outside a show and blogged or whatever.
Like cuts them out a bit.
Yeah, I think it cuts those people out. What do you think?
No, I mean, definitely. I mean, it makes sense that there has to be, you know, I mean, maybe it's why Lady Gaga struggled, because she couldn't find a way of cleaning up her look. You know, like, maybe, I mean, it just makes sense, doesn't it, that we need a cleaner, you know, after all this, like, you know, it's exhausting sometimes looking at my, I know I said that we shouldn't talk about Instagram all the time, but it's exhausting looking at my Instagram sometimes. You know, I've got to deal with how good all your meals are. And then I've got to, you know, and it's just like information, visual, bang, 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 bang. And I don't want to be exhausted. I don't want to look at, you know, somebody's outfit and be exhausted.
But I think, you know, it's interesting seeing this a second time, because you start to see more colour when it comes up again. It's really subtle, but you do see some stuff in there. And with this collection specifically, I kind of think, well, if Fendi is all about texture, then ginseng that's almost all black is kind of a really great way to show, because it's just about touch and almost feeling a collection rather than seeing it. But to your point, I mean, it has been an incredibly grey number of days in Milan after London, which was quite eclectic and kind of not joyful, but it was kind of had a lot of energy
youthful
about what was on the moment, even though there was some very dark collections. And I suppose people like Stefano Pilati at Zegna, you just kind of thought, oh, was that it? You know, just lots of great clothes on a great catwalk. So for whatever reason, Milan has gone very dark and grey, and it's after a season last year when they kind of went quite sporty and kind of chucked out the suit and seemed like they were trying to shake things up a bit. So it feels like a step back. If I look across the 3 days so far, it just seems like everything is either repeating previous winter, you know, bestsellers sort of, or treading water a bit.
But maybe that's more what Milan kind of is always about, you know, maybe it is more of that sort of, you know, like we said, so if everybody's going back to their roots, so London is kind of fun, cool, Prince, you know, young kids, and this is more like, you know, about heritage, it's about your furs, your black, you know, Prada wasn't dark actually, but you know, it's all that kind of thing of just very simple, like chic, Italian, you know,
and
quality.
selling a whole load of really nice, well-made clothes.
Yeah.
And Italy is super conservative.
Yeah.
Like it really is. It's very safe as a country. Like when I go there, I know to paint my nails red. Just red.
Chic.
Yeah.
And they love it. If I went in anything else, it would be like, you know.
But then like Delfina or something, do you feel like she's trying to switch that up a bit? Do you know what I mean? Like we were saying about the jewellery and like them incorporating the owls into the menswear, I think is quite unusual because they were all the women's bags that did so well. And I think it's people trying to change it, but it's definitely not the norm, is it?
It's not, and you can change it when you're from a very privileged family.
Totally, that's exactly what it is.
It's not like a street culture style, someone
true.
coming from Wolverhampton and doing something.
It doesn't happen
it's
in
not.
Italy.
It doesn't happen like that.
No,
So
that's true.
there is a safeness to it, and it's just like there's a few things it's going back to, in my opinion. Now we're just looking at it again and again. It's that thing of not necessarily knowing that it's luxury because it's so plain, and cutting out or weeding out or filtering out rather. People who can't identify true luxury because their idea of luxury is quite bold and colourful and out there and a logo or a bag or something. I think she does want to attract a type of person who recognises true luxury only when you get up close and touch it or feel it. And that's the really nice thing about working in fashion, that you really get through your hands, you get some of the most interesting, you touch so much amazing fabrics and weaves and prints and technology, and it is like it's a luxury to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
But with that whole touch thing, when we are sitting watching a catwalk show, I suppose that's what I could come back to, is it the right format for what she's trying to do, or do you just have to have a runway show? Is that, you know, is that just not an option not to have it?
Well, they didn't, did they, until, about 4 seasons ago? They had a little break from having, and so they've obviously decided they need to.
Did they do film or anything? Or?
I think they just did presentations.
They did appointments,
for
I think, and private viewings like Tom Ford did when they didn't do a show, it's the same thing.
Do they get celebrities on the front row at Fendi?
Yeah, I would think so.
Everyone does, right?
I don't know.
I don't know if everyone does.
It's Robin Abramovich and just put one either side.
I think they do, but
raising champagne
I think they,
glasses.
but again, I seriously think they do get sort of Italian celebrities, so very local and perhaps not the most obvious ones, but the ones that are sort of more the actresses.
Sorry,
I was going to say, because they did a lot of stuff for Kate Blanchett and Blue Jasmine, and also in I Am Love, and they're kind of known for dressing that kind of older, very sophisticated
Italian bourgeoisie.
Yeah.
I think as well it's hard to just say looking at the pictures, because if you've been to a fashion show, it's a fully immersive experience. Like when I went to my first fashion show, which no one ever forgets, do they? Their first fashion show. It was like incredible. The music is such a huge part of experiencing a fashion show, because it's usually the soundtrack that's been playing over and over again in the designer's studio. We're not getting the music, we're not getting the smell, the feeling, like whether it's hot, whether it's cold, we're not getting any of that. So it's hard to say what the 360 message is when you're not actually there.
And even if you're like in, you know, second, third row, you can still see those textures that we're talking about. So you can see that those trousers are probably cashmere. Like if you know your fabrics, and you can tell even like, you know, from not actually touching it in the showroom, you can still see that quality much more, you know, sort of visually in front of you.
I think also the other thing is you don't wear whole looks in real life. You know,
don't you? I'm sure I've seen you in a whole look.
It wasn't real life.
It was on
IRL.
Instagram.
But yeah, so you don't wear a whole look in real life, because I mean, it would be like just eating cake. You know, it would be like eating this 5 times a day. It would be sickly. You know, you're just going to wear one of these pieces, and I think that's probably how you'll consume it, and then it will be a different thing. So guys, let's have closing thoughts. Maybe John first.
I guess I came into it, like I said at the start, not really knowing who the Fendi man was, and I think maybe I kind of know a little bit more, but I don't feel the show has done anything in terms of selling it to me. Not that I'm a Fendi man, but
I think I'd actually say probably it was like a really beautiful collection, because actually I think I'm just thinking of in my mind's eye dissecting it all and thinking that actually I love that huge Prince of Wales coat. I think those trousers are probably incredible. Like Sharma said, the shoes look really cool. Like I think actually conceptually it works as a thing. It's very Fendi, it's very, you know, semi-predictable, but I think when it's all separated into beautiful pieces of ready to wear, I think that's when it'll probably shine the most in a way.
I think I'd agree with Verity. It's really nice in individual pieces, and I'd like to just touch them, really. I'd like to touch them and feel them and know the processes that have gone into each item before I'm going to get someone to spend £2,000 on a jumper. But it's really nice, and I think what's lovely is that it's a continuation of themes and ideas that she's been working on for a while, rather than flitting from this period to that period to something nostalgic. It's a nice continuation.
I think it's just beautiful, well-made clothes for the modern man. And don't tell Peta about those furs.
I'm sure they're there.
Yeah, they're there outside with flower bombs.
All right, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.